Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Lifters League podcast. In this episode, we talk with Luke Leaman.
So Luke Leaman is someone I know in a weird way because we actually never met, but we knew each other. We knew each other because we had the same business name for quite a few years. He's from America, where he had Muscle Nerds, and I had here in Australia Muscle Nerd. And when he moved over here to Australia, you know, he found who I was, and I kind of discovered him as well. So, and we end up bumping into each other in Canada, and since then I've learned a fair bit why he's had made such a successful business here in Australia. So he runs basically an education business, owns a gym, personal training studio, online coaching, but he's primarily, for what I've known him as, is working in education from the times he worked in the Polican Group. And if listeners don't know, the Polican Group is one of the biggest educational strength coaching programs that have gone around for many years. And he was one of the lecturers in there. So we didn't talk about anything specific, but we talked a bit about everything.
we covered pretty much everything, I think. He goes through what it was like to work for the Polican Group, kind of what happened after that. We talked through metabolic stuff, nutrition, supplementation,
Bodybuilding comp prep.
Talked
about drugs.
Bit of lifting culture in there as well. So we cover all the bases in this one. But it was a great chat. So enjoy.
Yeah.
Texan.
Yeah, not American Texan.
Texan.
It's different, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Separatist state.
They have Americans have very projected voices.
Yes, very loud.
Yeah.
Right, we're good to go. We are rolling.
So you know how I used to be called Muscle Nerd?
I knew you were doing this.
You don't remember how I used to be called Muscle Nerd?
How you used to be called Muscle Nerd?
Yeah. Well, this is his brand, Muscle.
No, but this is plural.
Muscle Nerds. So no trademark because of the yes, but funnily enough, like that's how I end up discovering him, because we had the same business name.
Oh, right.
So I had a full website and everything, and then saw your website and had a look through that a few times, and then end up getting some of his client, not getting your clients, but I had a lot of clients of yours wanting to see you, coming to see, calling me up. And I was just so confused about the conversations they were having, because it's just two different services. So it wasn't the same for you as well.
It not really, no. I mean, I didn't know about you until I moved here.
Yeah.
And so because when we started the company, we were basically had just left Polican Group, and I had come up with that name earlier, or one of my colleagues had come up with that name. So I had a Facebook profile that was Muscle Nerd Leaman. And I thought, man, that'd be a great business name, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so we trademarked it. And when I left, it's kind of my plan B if I left Polican Group, because I knew I was going to leave eventually, because they fire everybody eventually. So I had a plan B. And when we moved to Brisbane, because my wife was living here for about 8 years, so we decided to move here instead of moving to Texas. And when I got here, my friend goes, "Hey, do you know who Gus is?" I went, "Who?" He goes, "He's the Muscle Nerd. You should look him up." And I looked it up, and I went, "Oh shit! Like, is this? I mean, are we infringing on anything?" And we were like, "Well, we've got the trademark, so I don't know, and I don't know him." And then I saw you at Swiss, and he went up and said hi to you.
Yeah,
we shared a really awkward moment.
Yeah, I was a bit grumpy.
Were you?
I was so jet lagged. Absolutely.
Right. So this is the symposium that was, where was it?
In Canada.
In Canada, right? Okay. So you were jet lagged to fuck, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you end up speaking about?
I spoke about my least mode in prepping to prep, like getting people ready to even begin a contest prep instead of just jumping into it, like trying to get healthy first and then working on a bodybuilding show.
I think there's like a saying I have. It's like, it's preparing the body to weather a storm. Because no matter what, prep in any sport is fucked on the body.
Yeah.
You know, and we can't have any freaking sort of balance no matter what, because it's an extreme end of anything, you know. But being able to handle that prepare. But that's it. Interesting because it's like it's a similar philosophy for, I guess, some of the things I follow. What were some of the things you covered in that talk?
Yeah, some of the things is like looking at people's metrics, looking at their blood pressure, looking at their resting heart rate, looking at HRV as a measure of their allostatic load, and then talking about getting people into shape to actually jump into a prep. Because over the decades, I've had so many people come to me and they say, well, I want to do a bodybuilding show. Okay, cool. It's mainly women that come and they want to do bikini or physique or whatever, and they're not in any shape to even begin prep. And somebody at a different gym said, well, I'll put you on stage in 12 weeks. I said, well, he said he could do 12 weeks. I'm like, no, you're about 8 months out of a show. And they go, well, 3 months versus 8 months. I said, fine, I'll put you on a show this week, this weekend. There's no prerequisite except pay your thing and get on stage. But do you want to get on stage? Do you want to win? And do you also want to blow up after the contest? And they'd say, well, no, I don't want to blow up and get fat after the contest. Like, okay, we need to get you even ready to prep. So we'll start prepping. Then I'll tell you when your bodybuilding show is. I'll tell you when you're ready. And so I did that for, 2 decades. And then I got to the point where I got tired of fixing people that were jumping in the shows when they weren't ready. And then they'd lose their period. Their hair would fall out. They'd put on 25 kilos of fat after it. They were eating 700 to 900 calories and training 21 hours a week. And I'm like, you can't do this. And so we'd have to rectify and fix stuff after they'd already fucked themselves up.
This sounds familiar. We've had this conversation about 100 times.
Yeah.
We're literally just saying before how we've had several different disciplines of people we've spoken to, and the problems are all the same. People want immediate results, and it's just not possible. It's just not a thing you can do.
Also, like as the coach, good coach is finding their drive, their real goal, their real motivation behind doing that. Is it to be athletic, or is it because you just want to look good? And and then it's like, well, if your goal is just to look good, just look good.
Yeah.
You
don't need to do a show to look good. Do a photo shoot. Do something that doesn't have a time limit on it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there's nothing healthy about competition. It doesn't matter what you can play competition badminton, and you're going to have to go to extreme if you want to be at the best.
Yeah. I was interested in what you just said before, like pre-prep, getting ready for prep, was the with measuring metrics and HRV. And it's actually something that I'm not too familiar with, but have heard a lot about it in terms of assessing recovery in some aspects, or understanding in some aspects what the nervous system is doing. Can you shed a bit of light on what you do with HRV?
Yeah, so what we'll do initially, we look at everything that's happening in somebody's life.
Yeah.
So 'cause people, they need to understand that training is a stressor, dieting is a stressor, like caloric surplus is a stressor, caloric deficit is a stressor. Anytime you're pushing yourself to extremes, that's going to be a stressor. So if you're already stressed out and beasting life, the last thing you need to do is compound that with a lot of crazy training. And that's what people do. And they don't understand why they're getting injured. They don't understand why they start not sleeping well, why they lose their appetite. And so we look at the HRV as an indicator of your autonomic tone. If your HRV is really low, then you're probably not going to recover well. And your endocrinology is not going to work well either. So we need to get that high to get you ready to actually train hard. And then we'll monitor that from time to time. So we compound that with a lot of symptoms. So if you've got gut dysfunction, if we think you have some type of maybe clinical hypothyroidism or subclinical hypothyroidism, you cold hands and feet, really low blood pressure, really high blood pressure, not sleeping well. There's a host of physiological symptoms you look at, and then we've got that subjective data, but then we can combine that with some objective measurements like, is your heart rate really high or really low, or is it in the right range? Is your blood pressure too high or too low? Is the HRV too low? So when the HRV is too low, that shows that you're in a massively sympathetic state. And so if you go train and your body thinks you're basically fighting a bear when you're squatting, your body doesn't know you're doing squats to build nice legs. It doesn't know you're on the echo bike trying to get more condition.
Yeah.
There's only one reason why a human would be going that fast, is if it was running away from something.
Right.
So your body's going to respond in a sympathetic way. And if you're sympathetic outside the gym because you have a toxic relationship at home, you hate your job, you hate your kids, you got all this shit going on, it doesn't make sense to then go bash yourself at the gym, which a lot of people use the gym as a stress relief.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Not understanding you're just compounding more stress. And then eventually your hypothalamus is going to see that things aren't working well, and it's going to mount a reaction. So it's going to start doing things like lowering your thyroid. It's going to start lowering adrenal output or raising adrenal output really high, but eventually something's going to break, right? And it's all protective things that your body does. But what people need to understand is that the autonomic nervous system is there for an acute stressor. It's not supposed to be revved up chronically all the time. So if it's revved up chronically all the time, it's like you're putting your car in first gear and getting on the motorway and you're trying to drive 100 kilometers and you never go into second, third, or fourth gear. So eventually what would happen to your car if you did that?
Yeah, revved it into the ground.
Yeah, it'd run into the ground. Yeah. But that's exactly what people are doing.
What's your ideal picture for an athlete before starting?
My ideal they would have what we consider pretty much gold standard blood pressure, which would be somewhere around, the gold standard that we see in the literature is 115/75.
Right.
And we don't give people those static numbers because then they get obsessed about it. So if they're at 118, they freak out. If they're at 105, they freak out. So we give ranges. So for most men, we want to see them between 100 to 120 over around 60 to 80. Women, we tend to go a little bit lower because they tend to be a little bit hypotense. But if their blood pressure is really high, which we see a lot, I used to, when I teach, I take a blood pressure cuff and I'll hand it to all the coaches in the room. And I'm like, you guys need to take your blood pressure because you probably never have. And I remember in London, I had 60 students and only 4 people had normal blood pressure. It was me and 3 people I trained. And we had a guy that had 210/100 blood pressure.
Shouldn't he be dead?
He looked dead. He actually looked dead. And he's a huge unit. Like right. I think he won Mr. Universe Europe 2 years ago or something. And
okay.
So it was, again, for a very specific purpose, bodybuilder. So of course he's gassed to the gills and he's suffering a bit to try to win. So you're going to see that sometimes. But I was appalled that the rest of the coaches that didn't have any excuse to have really high blood pressure, they were all stage 1, stage 2 hypertension. Not even pre-hypertense, like they were 130 to 140 on up. And so we were basically giving awards to people with the highest blood pressure. I think he was 210, another guy was 180/100. And that got them really thinking about, shit, I really need to be doing this with my clients. I need to get my own health in order.
So what interventions do you have people who come to you where they're way outside the ranges you're happy with? Is your first stage to stage an intervention on that and then move into the other stuff?
Yeah. And
okay.
that's pretty much what the prepping to prep is.
Right, okay.
If you come to me and you're 180/100, the last thing we're going to do is a lot of heavy lifting. It's creating a lot of vascular pressure.
Right.
You're not getting on the leg press. You're not going to be doing heavy squats. Nothing where you have to brace. We're doing a lot more metabolic type work, so submaximal lifts with higher reps. A lot of those people too are injured.
Yeah.
So we have them doing more structural integrity type work, split squat, step ups, higher reps, unilateral work, things like that. Once we iron all that stuff out, and it doesn't take that long to iron out blood pressure. It's fairly simple. You give somebody a good bit of aerobic activity, so we might give them 5 to 8 weeks of aerobics and higher rep lifting, unilateral stuff, and then once all that stuff is nice and normal and we're comfortable with the range, then we move into more specific preparation.
Okay.
So I mean, what then? So I mean, what are the consequences of people not looking after their just blood pressure in itself, and then start going into prep?
Well, I mean, are you likely to hurt yourself right then? Probably not. But if you wash, rinse, and repeat that long enough, you're going to move yourself more towards some type of cardiovascular episode. So you're looking at things like heart attack, stroke, whatever. If you don't have a pliable vascular system and you continue to lift really heavy and you don't take care of your stress and you don't get enough sleep, eventually over time you're going to get plaquing and something's going to happen.
So what condition are we looking at in terms of, like, say, training nutrition wise? I know personally it's like, if I get someone who has been chronically overtrained, is that my job is to get them to a point where they are only training at a point where there's like quite sustainable, quite healthy 3-4 days a week of training, and they're not doing that for freaking hours and hours and hours. Can we sustain a lower training threshold? Is this something similar?
Yeah, it's very similar. We give lowest effective dose. I'm not saying that somebody can't lift heavy, but they want to limit. It's like they say the dose makes the poison, right? So if it's a power lifter and they need to lift heavy, then okay, we'll do 3 sets of 3, and then we'll move on to metabolic work, and all their accessory work will be more metabolic in nature. And then we try to get them to do a lot more aerobic activity, because that's the one thing that the industry doesn't like to do. Is they think that you're trying to make them a marathon runner. That's not the point. I'm trying to get you to do under 65% VO2 max for extended periods of time, so we can restructure the morphology of the heart so that if you expand the left ventricle cavity, you can balance out the thickness of the left ventricle, the blood pressure goes down, and then the vascular system gets more pliable.
So are you looking at just like particular health markers, or are you preparing them in terms of the work capacity and nutritional stress they're going to be able to take through training and nutritional interventions?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing too. We find that if we get somebody to a sufficient level of aerobic activity, their work capacity goes up. So when they go back to training, they can actually lift more longer. So they don't fatigue, their lactate threshold gets better. They're not crippled after they train. They can recover much faster, so they can lift more often. So we've only seen benefits of that. As long as you stay in the rules, right? If somebody's training for a marathon, they're probably not going to get stronger. But if we're talking about 30 minutes, maybe 60, even up to 60 to 90 minutes of easy aerobic activity every day, it's not really something that you have to recover from. But from the nutritional standpoint, we're doing all of this for the aerobic adaptations. We're not doing it to chase calories or lose body fat, at least not directly. So if we look at the nutrition side, we might be giving them a small nutritional deficit just to make sure that we don't have any inflammatory issues from being in a surplus. But most of the people that come to us aren't eating enough anyways.
Yeah.
Or they're not eating enough every day. What they're doing is basically binging and purging. So
that's me.
So yeah, like Monday through Friday, people have a really good structure because they're working.
Yeah, we literally just had this conversation. Yeah.
So you give someone 2,400 calories during the week, but they're in meetings and skipping meals, and they're not meal prepping properly. So they end up eating like 1,600, and then on the weekend, their brain goes, "Yeah, fuck you. I'm gonna make you eat and make all these calories up," and then they end up blowing it out over the weekend and eating 15,000 calories over the weekend. So they're actually globally in a surplus, but they're spending 5 or 6 days starving themselves and then making it up over, a 36-hour period. Every time you do that, it only takes, 3 to 5 days of starving yourself is enough to lower your metabolic rate. And you generally need about 3 days of overfeeding to try to rectify that. So people will overfeed Friday night, booze, and going out to eat. They'll do it Saturday, and then they feel guilty, so they start starving themselves Sunday, and they'll starve themselves until Friday, and they'll do it over again and over again. And you do this for long enough, and your metabolic rate continues to drop. So that surplus continues to get relationally higher and higher and higher. So you keep putting on more and more fat.
This is why we were talking about not having, and there should be no such thing as a cheat.
No
cheat
day.
days, should be calculated refeeds because it'll change every cycle, every time. So, have you done much bodybuilding prep with people?
Yeah, tons.
Yeah,
tons, but I hate it. I don't want to do it anymore. So
we had this conversation before. I completely stopped taking on bodybuilders.
Right. Okay. Why?
Too much work.
They're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
They all have mommy daddy issues.
It's just an eating disorder dressed up as a human. Yeah.
Oh man, just 4, 5, 6, 7 times more work than some of my strength athletes. And just
the thing I don't get about bodybuilding is it's a subjective aesthetic sport. At least in powerlifting, there are numbers. You can reach a number. There are waypoints you can aim for. There is no I've made it point with bodybuilding, right? You're never good enough. You're never big enough. You're never lean enough. Like, you're just asking for a mental breakdown, aren't you, really? It must be.
Yeah. And once you've been really lean, anything above that is too fat.
I'm fat.
Well, once you've been dick skin lean, 8% is fat to you.
Of course.
So it fucks with your head. And so people never have an off season. They just want to be shredded all the time. You can't progress like that. You can't just keep starving yourself for years and years and years. You're going to end up paying it back. It's like a metabolic credit card.
It's simply the whole freaking paradigm or culture behind bodybuilding is simulating that disordered thinking in the first place. I mean, It's like you have to, you're constantly trying to get rid of fat, and that's all you're thinking about. I'm fat. No, even though you're freaking, 10%, 8%, which is very, very fucking lean.
A true 8% is really fucking lean, a lot leaner than most people think.
So the word true is important there, isn't it? Because that's the other thing that gets skewed. I've seen a lot of bodybuilders say they're a percentage, but they skew it towards the larger side because in their own head they're fatter than they want to be, right? So that's another thing. Like it's too subjective for me. It's just no wonder they're crazy, right?
I'm interested what you did with the Poliquin group. I actually didn't realize didn't realize you actually like that's where you're doing most of your work before Muscle Nerds.
Yeah, so I learned of Charles in the early 90s through Muscle Media and T-Mag.
Yeah.
When it was testosterone.net.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I think I was 13 or 14 when I started studying all of his stuff. I said, I've got to meet this guy at some point. So I saved up. And in 2007, I went and met him and did my PICP1 in my first biosig course. And then I was hooked. Like back then, the culture of when it wasn't Poliquin Group, it was, Poliquin Strength Institute. And there was a massive culture there that you didn't find anywhere else. Kind of like what CrossFit has now. We were all a bit crazy and we're all in the same, everybody that was in it were like absolute animals.
It's a cult, yeah.
It was almost like a cult, but it was good though. It was a good cult, right? And you'd go to seminars and everyone would be training and just killing each other. And it was fun. It was like a brother and sisterhood. And you would call friends and you would go to the same seminars and stay with each other. And all you do is just eat, shit, sleep, and train. And it was glorious. And eventually I got asked to come on as a coach. So I came on and I did assistant stuff, mainly teaching biosig. And later on, I ended up coming on full time. And at that point, I put all of my stuff in storage, moved away from Texas for the first time, moved to Rhode Island, which is the worst fucking state in the world to live in. I was fucking horrendous. And I got there and I went, where's Charles? And they're like, he's no longer with the company. And I went, what? And then Andre Benoit, his right-hand man, was gone too. And Ryan Finley, another coach, was gone. And so I showed up at the first meeting. I went, where is everybody? They're like, they're gone. And I go, sweet. You didn't think to tell me this before I packed all my shit in the storage and flew across the country? Awesome. But then it was too late. I was already there. I just had to had to start teaching and basically had to take over what he did and try to.
So Poliquin wasn't part of it anymore.
No, no. There was this like massive coup with his ex-wife. Charles did some stupid things, but she basically raked him over the coals, and just made his life a living hell for the last few years of it. And I got like kind of stuck in the middle of everything, and I was like, well, fuck it, I'm just here. I'm just going to do my job. I'm going to travel and teach. And then I got to the point where I wouldn't even go back to Rhode Island. I'd fly to Europe and I'd stay with friends, and I'd be like, tell me when I need to come back for a meeting. I'd fly home, go to a meeting, and I'd leave immediately. I just refused to live there. It's a fucking horrible place. It's cold.
Wet.
It's cold all the time. It's like 8 months of freaking cold and gray and just miserable.
You just described my childhood. I grew up in Manchester in the UK, and they call it the rainy city in the UK. And the UK is fucking the rainiest place. So my childhood was, if it wasn't raining, it was grey and cloudy, and it was going to rain. There's just two phases to it, and hence the reason I flew to Brisbane.
That's the first city I ever went to when I went overseas.
Really?
Manchester. Yeah, I've been to Manchester a lot of times. And every time rains sideways.
Right, it does, yeah.
And it's always that rain that's like, is it going to rain or is it just going to kind of just spit on me all day? And it's
like
it
a
is.
fine, misty kind of rain. It's not really raining, so you don't really prepare for it, but then you get in and you're fucking drenched. Oh, God, I hated it.
The worst food I've ever had in any city was Manchester.
That doesn't shock me either. Sorry, man.
What's Charles like?
Oh, Charles is a maniac.
Yeah.
Charles, it depends. Like Charles was very, very moody. Like if you were on his good side and he liked you, he was the most generous person I've ever met in my life. And he would help you out. He'd call you on your birthday. You'd be like, holy shit, this dude's calling me on my birthday. But you couldn't understand him because he'd call you and he'd be in Colorado where he lived. So he'd be in the mountains, so his cell phone would be really sketchy. And then he had his thick Montreal accent. And so you couldn't fucking understand anything he was saying. You would just be like, yes, Charles. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. And then you'd realize, oh, it's my birthday today. He's calling me to wish me. Oh, thank you, Charles. You couldn't understand a fucking word he said unless you were with him.
Yeah.
But he was good. Like Charles was good. He was brilliant. I mean, you think about all the coaches in the industry that wouldn't be where they are without him. And what I liked about Charles is he was willing to take big leaps. Like he would use not just research, but also anecdotal data, stuff that he saw that worked, and his own type of research. And that's kind of why he got a lot of flack, because some of the stuff he did, he couldn't prove, but he saw that it worked, and he would just, fuck it, he'd teach it.
Yeah.
And all the evidence-based people, which I don't like the word evidence-based for them. It's more research-based. If it's not in the research, it doesn't exist. And so he was willing to look at both sides of that.
I think that's the thing that separates the people who are at the front, that they're innovating and trying and testing everything, because research is never going to catch up, or even if tested, and even then on the right population of people that we're working with. What are your ideas? What were your views on how you thought about his, I'll call it, supplement regimes or methods?
Extreme. Yeah. But, it's like you said, people are being innovative. And people are being innovative, they're always going to be crucified by people who don't want to be innovative.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that we did back then with BioSig stuff was pretty extreme, but it worked. I don't do that stuff anymore, but I still have the training in it and further research. And a lot of the stuff he said back then is actually being validated now. Like some of this stuff, and he was getting a lot of his information from companies like Metagenics, who tends to be on the forefront of supplementation. So Pure Encapsulations, Metagenics, all of these pharmaceutical companies.
Only company I use.
Metagenics?
Metagenics, yeah.
So we use Thorn Research. I find them to be very good. But I just don't have access to Metagenics, or I do some of their products too.
Yeah.
But a lot of the protocols and a lot of the stuff he was doing, now there's a lot of research validating what he was saying. He had some pretty wild, crazy shit, but most of it was pretty solid.
Yeah, I always found it a bit. I think that all the industries change. The industry changes all the time, So I guess I find where in the area, the area I'm working at, is people pulling more away from supplementation, because it's the same thing. I mean, if the foundations aren't right, there's no point taking however many grams of vitamin C he recommended.
Yeah.
What was that? What story? There was something, I think I heard of somewhere. He kept upping his dose to the point he absolutely shat his pants.
I don't know about that. I know he was a big fan of intravenous IV.
Yeah.
Like he would take massive doses of that, and that's now being validated too. So, and he was the first person in the strength industry to talk about getting IV therapy, and now it's a pretty common thing.
Oh, that's with all your you like vitamins and minerals in IV,
like Myers cocktails and things, like taking IV glutathione and NAD and NAC and stuff like that.
Yeah, different absorption for it. Is it? Because I think there's some recent research I came across with L-carnitine, using injectable L-carnitine over oral, having effects as strong as what's that medication? Metformin. So they're comparing injectable L-carnitine with metformin to see, could also get to a point where it could also almost replace it, because it's like 100% bioavailable.
Yeah.
And they're using it to combat insulin resistance.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with L-carnitine in oral form. It takes months and months of consistent use to actually get it where it needs to be. And then there's some other evidence too that if your microbiome is off a little bit, it can increase TMAO, which has been indicated and associated with heart disease. And I actually found that out because I was taking 2.5 grams of L-carnitine a day, and my wife told me I smelled fishy. And I was like, what do you mean fishy? I don't eat a lot of fish because I like fish that doesn't taste like fish, right? Like dory, right? and prawns and things. I was like, I'm not taking a lot of fish oil. I don't know. And you can't smell it yourself. And I started looking into it and saw the TMAO connection. And then I got off the carnitine, the fishy smell went away. So then I worked on my gut a little bit, got back on the carnitine, and no more fishy smell. But when you do it IV, you bypass that because you're not actually getting into the gut. So whenever I recommend that somebody might need carnitine, like we'll recommend it mainly to vegans or people who are really overweight, might actually need more carnitine. We always tell them to take injectable if they don't have any qualms about injecting themselves with something. But that's also hard because people associate a needle with being a crackhead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like the average person.
Yeah. So when you tell somebody to do 300 or 400 milligrams of injectable carnitine, they're like, oh, I don't know about that. They're either scared of needles or they're like, I don't want to be a crackhead. It's like, you're not. It's a quick intramuscular injection with an insulin pen. It's nothing. But I've gotten really far away from the supplement side just because I don't want clients to think I'm just trying to sell them stuff they don't need. So we say, good multivitamin, a high-powered multivitamin like Metagenics or Thorne or something like that. Fish oil, if you're not eating any fish, at least 3 to 6 grams a day. And then anything above and beyond that, maybe a digestive enzyme or something. That's pretty much where that's where we draw the line, unless it's more prescriptive type stuff.
So pretty much exactly close to my pretty much philosophy. Fish oil has always been in there. Just that ratio, was it the standard Western diet? Something, the ratio of
20 to 1.
Yeah.
Usually. That's minimum too. I've seen people on a fatty acid spot test upwards of 60 to 1.
Shit.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be in America, right? That's got to be. Please say that's America.
They're not too far off here either.
I knew. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
I remember when I first came to Australia, you didn't see so much fast food here. And then over the years, I've seen more and more fast food. And I've also seen more and more of the population getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah,
it's slowly going towards that way, isn't it? Because we have a pretty... I mean, I've always liked the Australian food culture here. But they've always had a pretty good focus on quality restaurants. But yeah, a lot of those fast food American...
I think... But there's a lot to be said for the fact that I think that there's been a massive marketing push. There's lots of money in upmarket. Burgers are the one, I think, that at the moment it's really hitting with, because they're fucking cheap to make. And if you upmarket them a little bit more than just McDonald's, you can sell them for $10 a burger, and you can make $8, and it tastes really fucking good, right? And then obviously the Uber Eats thing, you don't even have to go... You don't have to make the commitment to go to the fast food place to get it anymore. You can get it delivered to your door. They're making it harder and harder for you to make that decision to actually prepare your own food, or go to a decent restaurant. Right? People are lazy. It's only obviously with COVID, that has probably gone 10x over the last few months. People not leaving their houses. Man,
COVID was great on my physique. Because I live in Scarborough, so there's not a lot of really great restaurants up there. So there's only so much Uber Eats you can do. So I went out and bought an air fryer and started using my Instant Pot and air fryer more, and I got shredded ass.
Air fryers, man. Did you get it from Kmart?
No, I got the Philips one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Fuck. So there's an insane Facebook group, right? Of people who are doing spot checks at Kmart's for air fryers, because as soon as they come in, an alert goes up. I had a friend who drove to Caloundra from here to get an air fryer from Kmart. People are fucking obsessed with. They're amazing though.
They are amazing.
They're fucking amazing. You can throw anything in them. Just set, forget.
My wife won't let me get one because we have 1-bedroom apartment. I already have too many devices, and she likes the house to look a certain way.
Right. Okay. Got
so
you.
if I get rid of that, can I?
The Instant Pot's good too. It's like a fast slow cooker.
Like a pressure cooker.
It's a pressure cooker crock pot thing.
Yeah, because you can put traditional slow cooked meats in there and just blast it for 40 minutes or whatever, and it comes out like a stew. Yeah.
Yeah, I can make baby back ribs in like 25 minutes instead of smoking them for 6 hours, and it basically tastes the same.
So back to the Poliquin group, what were you teaching? So was it BioSig and their certification?
Yeah, the strength and conditioning certifications, and then also the BioSig stuff, and then special considerations courses too. We were doing MMA courses, movement courses, stuff like that.
How long are those courses?
So those courses are typically 2 to 3 days.
So I remember there was one here. I think there might have been one here in Brisbane, but it was many years ago. I haven't seen anything. Are they still going?
Hell if I know. I know they lost their building. They built an $11 million building, and then they basically fired all of us who helped write some of the material we're teaching. Yeah. And then they kind of went downhill after that. So I know they've moved out of their building. I heard they got a new office somewhere, but I don't think they're doing much. I think they're pretty much done.
I've heard a lot about BioSig, but actually me personally, I don't know too much about it. I've always done 3-site, 9-site for bodybuilders, but not that often. Yeah. What sets it apart? Why has it been so? Some people take it up as very popular. They had the idea behind, was it like certain sites had a correlation between various
different hormones and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of when you look at it, there was a lot of good stuff in biosig, and there was a lot of like far-reaching concepts that couldn't be proved yet. A lot of it came from Charles's work that he did with the Canadian national team, where they were doing bloods and things like that back in the 80s, and he found different correlations between hormones. And then so kind of his premise was you could spot reduce fat if you got the hormones to reorganize yourself. And we've seen some of that work, right? Now, when I was teaching, I got to the point where I was like, let's not focus on spot reducing, but let's all agree that hormones will make you spot gain, right? So there's a reason why people have a gynoid versus an android, or some people have lots of tricep fat or hamstring fat. So if we look at that, we know that some of that can be, can be contributed by a hormonal imbalance. Now, if we get all that stuff back in line with a doctor using pharmaceuticals like hormone replacement therapy or whatever, or if we do use certain nutraceuticals that we know will do some of the same stuff, can we spot reduce? Maybe, maybe not, but we can prevent some spot gaining in some of those areas. And the problem is there's not enough research on it right now, so everybody said Charles is full of shit.
Yeah.
But there's thousands of Pelican coaches that have seen how miraculous it can be. So, I don't use a lot of it anymore. I prescribe supplements in a different manner based on, looking at labs, looking at bloods and organic acids testing and things like that, and looking at symptoms. But there's something to it. And they've done some research lately where they would have, I think one of the papers, they had two groups, one lifted with their upper body, one only lifted lower body, and then they would do cardio after their sessions. And the people who lifted lower body lost primarily fat on the lower body, and the people who did the upper body work lost primarily fat on the upper body. So there's something to it. It just hasn't been proven yet.
It's interesting because if you say that, I think that's still in the realms of you're a bit crazy.
Yeah. But people don't want to use empirical observation anymore. They just want to go to the research, which I think is very limiting. Because if you're waiting for somebody to put the research out, you're going to be decades behind everybody else who's actually using it and seeing results from it.
What about just like there's something in science I've always used as like Occam's razor, the most likely expression, and it's like, well, if you change someone's diet and training, you're probably going to make a huge impact on how their body and their physiology is adapting. But if you're already having a preconceived notion that something is going to make a change hormonally, then how do we draw those conclusions? Does that come in the language at all with what they do? Or is that
I'm a big fan of Occam's razor, and that's what I teach my students too, is when you have a problem, you need to look at all the various possible solutions and pick the simplest one, and that's usually one that works. And if it's not, it's probably the second simplest one. One of the things I think is a problem with teaching people biosig or metabolic analytics or whatever they're doing is most of these trainers don't know enough about biochemistry to understand the consequences of giving certain things. And they don't understand how any endocrinology, so they don't understand how these things fit together. And if you mess with one thing, you're messing with a lot of different things. So you have to be very careful so you don't mess somebody up.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand, but I also believe that about nutrition and training, if you don't understand physiology or biochemistry, then you probably shouldn't be giving people nutrition.
Would you look at just saying, like, where you would say, like, let's look at health markers, let's look at training, let's look at good nutrition to see what impact that has on the biochemistry before going down the biochemistry route?
Absolutely. I mean, well, before you go down the supplement route, because the thing is, if you just fix their diet, fix their sleep, and work on stress management and get them training with stuff they can recover from, that'll get them 80% of the way there. And if you look at giving supplements, that should be those outliers that's not working for them. Right? So I have a lot of clients at the IOPC at our gym that we open, a lot of women with Hashimoto's and autoimmune stuff. And so the stuff can be really valuable with them, but I also understand those types of pathologies. So I know what we can and can't do, and I know the right doctors to get them with. And we see tremendous success when they haven't had any success at all. And that probably goes back to some of the biosig stuff. And then that got me interested in supplementation. That got me interested in learning biochemistry. So I went balls out into that, right? So when we get women in with high antibodies, I know what to do to get those down. If they haven't shit in 3 weeks because they got gut dysfunction because of low thyroid, I know what to give them that can fix that type of stuff, right?
So were you guys doing tests on this by, say, like, okay, this site's associated with this? Would you go try to confirm it with bloods and
Yeah, see,
swabs?
I don't do any of the body fat testing anymore. None of that. I'm symptom based, and then they usually have labs when they come to me. So I'll look at their labs. I'll ask them what their doctor said. I'll fill in the gaps from what their doctor probably doesn't know. Because especially here in Australia, where the doctors, a businessman I once knew said a statement to me. He goes, he lives by the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. Well, here the government has the gold, so they get to make the rules. And so the doctors here, if you have Medicare, they have to stay in a box that the government tells them they can stay in. If they try to go outside, they have to lose their license. So there's no real, and they're not outcome based doctors. So it doesn't matter if they fix people; they just see as many people as they can every hour.
Just get them out the surgery.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
Yeah, there's no incentive for them to do a good job or to learn other stuff and do continuing education. And so it takes other people to fill in those gaps for people sometimes.
Yeah.
But I go based on labs, and I look at labs and I look, okay, why is this off? Well, let's look at this. Okay, that's off 2. Let's look at this. That's off 2. Let's match that with the symptoms. Say, okay, you haven't pooped in 3 weeks. The doctor wants you to live on laxatives. That's not going to work. Let's give you a digestive enzyme. Give them a digestive enzyme. The next day they take 2 shits. It's just really basic, easy stuff. If your antibodies are high, let's try, upping your selenium a little bit and just try to get the antibodies down. Okay, cool. We dropped your antibodies 70 in 2 months. That's fantastic. It's stuff like that.
So, I mean, when is this approach ever taken then? If you're working with a lot of general pop now, I mean, you're lucky to get a gen pop to the point where everything is
Perfect.
up to scratch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just that be the case that you just probably never end up at a point where you're...
Yeah, I mean, I really don't, unless they've got some type of weird pathology or some issue where a supplement might work. I don't give them any supplements other than what we said, like whey protein, right, or vegan protein if they're vegan, digestive aid, multivitamin, fish oil. That fixes a lot of stuff. Maybe a little extra magnesium, real basic things. And then after a few months, if we see there's other issues, then we might give them something else. If they're not sleeping well, we might give them something. Tell them to, order some melatonin and try to get it in the country, since for some reason that's illegal here. It blows my mind. But we try to not use it.
I never realized melatonin was illegal here.
Yeah,
because it's used as a jet lag. To deal with jet lag. I know back home in the UK, everybody pops it when they do long haul.
Yeah.
It's weird because we live furthest away here from anywhere than anywhere else in the world.
It's a fantastic antioxidant.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to lower cortisol. It's fantastic to reestablish circadian rhythm, and it's illegal. And if you want it, you go to the doctor and they charge you $60 a bottle for something you can buy for $5.
I think you've answered why it's illegal there.
Yeah, money.
Prescriptions, yeah, okay.
I always get your ads on my Instagram. It's always a couple. It's always the same one. It's like, what do you say?
Most people are fucking people up.
Yeah. I think we talked a little bit about this yesterday about some of the. Well, I guess most of the trainers you're already getting are more messed up themselves.
Yeah.
Than others. I mean, what are some of the things we're seeing? Is it just poor health practices or unethical approaches to?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's obviously the unethical thing, but people who are doing unethical stuff tend to not come to our courses.
Yeah.
So we tend to attract really good coaches that want to learn. They just don't know a whole lot, and they don't understand how far down the rabbit hole goes until they get balls deep into it, right? But yeah, there's obviously the unethical things, like prep coaches. The first thing they talk about is what steroids are you willing to take, and they haven't even talked about training or diet yet.
Yeah.
And then coaches taking on clients that they don't know about. They don't know anything about that sport or that client, or the person has a disease, and you're not supposed to take those people. You can't do anything outside of just train them, stuff like that. But a lot of the coaches these days, they just don't have a broad level of knowledge, and they have no depth of their knowledge. And most of the stuff they're getting, they won't pay for education. They try to get all their information for free off of Instagram.
Yeah, it's just what cut it.
Yeah, and what I've found is, I found a high correlation between the more people that follow you on Instagram, the less you probably know. Because most of the people with hundreds of thousands or millions of followers don't know shit.
Yeah.
And some of those people have been to my courses or done mentorships with me, and they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about.
It appeal if you know less, you're more likely to offer the quick fixes, the black and white options for everything, and that's far more appealing to far more people. A lot of people would prefer to watch somebody who can tell them they can do all this shit by just taking this pill and just doing this exercise and all that shit with no nuance there, right? Like I kind of get that. I remember seeing I can't remember who it was. I think I might be quoting Gary Vaynerchuk, which makes me want to vomit. But he was saying he had a friend who only had 10 Twitter followers, but he ran a startup in Silicon Valley or something, and those 10 Twitter followers were Warren Buffett, fucking Steve Jobs, whatever. And the point is that was an indication of his quality. It's kind of like he only attracted the people who knew the most because they were the only people he could talk to. Nobody else could really understand the depth of what he was talking about. And I guess it's similar, right? Like general population aren't going to be interested in the stuff that you guys put out because it's going to be too much for them. And they don't want to hear things are hard and difficult and it's not all easy, right? Like, I completely get it.
People want to hear crazy shit. They don't want to hear that you just need to focus on the basics for a really long time.
Yeah, consistency and time.
Yeah.
But then also kind of like dilutes it because like I make freaking strong athletes, but then they don't hear the 3, 4, 5 years it's taken for them to get there. So when I first took up powerlifting, there wasn't as much of that huge separation between who are like crazy strong and new people coming in. We were like all within reach of each other, so it didn't seem so as absurd. So the culture's a little different. We were just all super competitive, and then now it's so far apart. People have done it for so long now, and you got these absolutely crazy people who seem to come out of nowhere, but they just they've been training forever and just decide to expose themselves now because of social media. Like where do these people come from? But and then now people, because they only see the instant results that these people are getting, it's kind of changed the view on how fast people want to make progress, and it just won't happen, especially with strength, or I guess body composition as well.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it like we were talking about this yesterday. I mean, if you want to be at the top level of strength, you're in it for 7 to 9 years. You're not gonna have a 80 kilo bench press to be benching 300 kilos in a year. It's not gonna happen. And the people think that that's possible, and they go, "Well, I'll just take drugs." Even with drugs, they're not magic. They help, but that's not going to get you there. It's going to get you there faster, but it's not going to fix everything.
We discussed that before. You don't inject a steroid and become the Hulk, right? And I think that's what a lot of normal people think. These people who lift these big weights, even if they're juiced or not, they've still got to go in the gym and do the fucking work. Like they're still lifting the weight, right? So obviously it makes it easier, and the results speak for themselves.
I always say it's like what foundation are they taking these drugs? Because if you are not making progress and then want to take drugs to make progress, then that progress is only going to be limited by simply just by making those chemical changes in the body. There's no additional stimulus, or you're not using it to its full advantage compared to the other way, where it's like build a solid foundation, and this is an assistance to continue that progression, or an assistance to enhance that recovery.
I lifted for 13 years and competed in powerlifting, and I was already 110 kilos before I ever touched a steroid. And I tell people that, and they're like, "Really? Yeah. I mean, I didn't need it. You're a teenager. You definitely don't need it.
Yeah.
If you've lifted for a few years, you probably don't need it. But you have people now, it's like they just start lifting, and 3 months of lifting, you're like, okay, what do I need to take? It's like, no, you need to lift for a few years, see what you can do, get to your natural limit, and then think about it after that.
And always say, like, know what works. Because what works for you, not in terms of gear, but in terms of food and nutrition and training, and know your body well enough to know if you are or are not responding, because then you're not just relying on what people end up doing. It's just like, I'll pile more drugs. All right, I'll take 500 milligrams, now 750, now a gram, and then 2 grams, and then fucking trend, and then fucking debo, and then they end up just being this chemical mess.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm appalled by how much people take these days.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, I got a theory about it that because most of the stuff's underground, like 95% of the storage you're going to see are underground. And getting really good pharmaceutical stuff is difficult and it's really expensive. So I'm guessing a lot of people got underdosed stuff, so they just kept taking more and more. And then when they got really good stuff, they didn't take less. So I've seen both bodybuilders and powerlifters on a gram of tren. It's like, why are you on a gram of tren? It's the only thing that works. And then they actually get real tren and they're on a gram, and now they've got really high blood pressure. They're super ragey. Their nose bleeds all the time. They go, I don't know what's happening. I'm like, you're on too much fucking tren. And then people that want to take tren for the first cycle, that's big boy shit. Like, people don't understand how powerful it is. Just take test. Take test first and just see how you go with that. And if that's not enough, then after a few rounds, a few cycles, then throw something else in there. You know, throw DECA in there, or throw whatever, depending on what sport you're, equipoise or something mild, just as a little boost. And then, you know, as you get bigger, start thinking about adding more and more things instead of just jumping on, 4 grams of shit for your first cycle and not even knowing how to train or eat right, so you still look like garbage.
Someone said something. I listened to a podcast. He goes, you shouldn't be fucking measuring testosterone in grams. You measure protein in grams, not freaking testosterone.
Well, most of the Australian guys I see, I go, okay, before we start, what are you on? They're like, I'm on a mill of this, a mill of this, a mill of this. That doesn't tell me. I need to know how many milligrams you're on. Oh, I just take a mill. But okay, is it 100 milligrams per mill? Is it 400 mil? I don't know. I don't know what you're on, so I can't really tell you what you're on unless we know what those are. And no one here, for whatever, thinks that way, that they need to measure how many actual milligrams. Your body doesn't know what a mill is. That's not the active ingredient. We need to know how much shit you're actually putting in your body.
I get shocked every time, like just how you think you would take for granted in terms of some basic line knowledge about the approach to taking anabolics, and it's just not there, is it? Just not there.
But there's sounds like there's just a genuine knowledge gap. Like,
it's a taboo topic too. It's just one of those things that just don't get...
the more nobody discusses it, the worse it's going to get, right? Because people are just going to be fucking, like I said, paying attention to people.
I talked to a guy probably 5 weeks ago who was taking 2 milligrams of Arimidex a day.
Fuck.
And he's like, my memory's shot, like my skin's dry, I can't sleep, all this stuff's happening to me. I'm like, you probably don't have any estrogen in your body anymore. And he's like, well, estrogen's bad, right? It's a 21-year-old guy. Estrogen's bad, right? No, estrogen's not bad. You need estrogen. What are you doing? He goes, well, it made me really dry. I'm like, yeah, but now you're all fucked up. And it's going to take me a while to fix you.
Fucking hell. And I've seen the same thing, like the stupidity coming from boyfriends, the boyfriend's advice to their girlfriends. Like, they'll put them on the exact same thing that they're doing. It's like, okay, you need to take some Arimidex as well. And it's like, man, you're like, absolutely, like, they're meant to have these hormones in their body, and they actually fucking stripping it, and they're making them doing, the same post-course therapy, the same anti-estrogen stuff, and it's just like, fuck.
Yeah, I remember when 15, 16 years ago, like Anavar, like 12.5 milligrams was a big dose per day. And now I know girls taking 25 milligrams of that. Winstrol, nobody would touch Winstrol. If they did, it was like 2 milligrams a day. I know girls on 50 milligrams of Winstrol now. I know girls on Tren. I know bikini girls who are on massive amounts of growth and peptides. Like, you don't even need to look that good to do bikini.
No.
What are you doing?
Wow.
If you're doing bikini, if you're taking drugs for bikini, fuck. Like,
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Unless you're a pro, but if you're doing bikini for amateur, you probably don't need anything, right? If you're a pro, yeah, okay, now maybe you take some Anavar, Primo, if you can find real Primo, but it's like you're doing all this shit for a plastic trophy, and you're probably never going to go pro because you train like a pussy, and you won't eat to put on muscle. So just do a photo shoot and get off all the drugs.
Yeah, and not mess yourself up. I think you said you got sick of fixing people too, and because I've done some good work with some other girls in the past, and because of that, because I did this really good job with it, where I spent like prep was like a year and a half long, and they got on stage. One looked great, healthy, still eating heaps, no freaking bad rebound. And then I started getting people who were fucked up because I did so well with these other girls, and not realizing that, well, we're gonna have to spend like 2 years. And then literally that was it. But one of the girls I got, it took like nearly 2 years before we can just have baseline training and nutrition to sustain what we have. Because if we go outside of what they were doing already, the crazy shit they're doing already, they start to blow out. They start to not respond how a normal human being should respond.
Yeah, we get that all the time. Girls that have done it the wrong way, and they didn't even look good. They look like shit, and they come to you and they're all kinds of jacked up. Their labs look like shit. Their symptoms are shit. You're like, look, this is going to take a while to fix. Like, it's going to take probably at least a year to even get some traction. And then you try to overfeed them. You know, they're eating 1,100 calories. You try to put them on 2,400 calories. They gain 2 kilos and they freak out, go back to 1,000 calories. And then you spend 2 years just trying to get them to the point where they understand that they can eat, and that weight gain is not fat. It's fat-free mass. If I give you more carbs, you're going to hold more water. You're going to gain a little bit of weight. That's fat-free mass. Don't worry about it. So we've even gone to the extent of making girls get in a sauna or getting into a hot bath and weigh themselves before and after to see the drop. Say, okay, you didn't just lose 2.2 kilos of fat, you lost water. So we can keep pumping your food up, you're fine. If you start to get fluffy, that's okay, we can always take it off. But sometimes it takes, like I said, 2 years to get their head wrapped around the process of actually needing to gain weight if they want to fix all their shit.
Yeah. And I think most of the hurdles is psychological, because you'll think they're on the right track and psychologically on the right track, and then they'll come back to you a few days later and it's like, what the fuck happened? Yeah. Like, where did your head go in those few days that you think this is all failing and this is not working anymore? And that, yeah.
And the best is when you're like, how are you sleeping? I'm sleeping great. How's your guts? They're better. How's your training? Awesome. Okay, but I gained 2 kilos. Now I'm going to starve myself. It's like, fuck, focus on the shit that matters.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's like one reason why too. Now I just don't want to work with them anymore, because it's just always more work than it ever ends up being. And then because I already try to plan out like how much I'm going to work with people. Plus, I think I'm just getting less and less interested in working with that population now, and taking quite a strong performance approach now. So just so much more enjoyable. So you working much with performance athletes?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people that I train now are high performance, whether they're competing or not. So like a lot of them are ultra marathoners. Somehow I've like fallen into the endurance athlete thing. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Or hybrid athletes. Like I have one guy, Costa, in Adelaide. He's like the fucking Terminator. He's like the Greek Terminator. So he hired me because he wanted to have a double body weight front squat, and he wanted to PR his 12K run. And I go, could you pick 2 goals? And he wanted to do it in like 3 months. Could you pick 2 goals that they're a little closer?
Yeah.
Instead of and we did it. We shaved 4 minutes off of his 12K, and he had a double body weight front squat. And then he's like, yeah, I like being strong. I'm gonna do a powerlifting meet. I'm like, sweet. So we did a powerlifting meet. He won best lifter, and then he went and PR'd his 12K again. Then he's like, I want to run a marathon, but I also want to do a powerlifting meet. He did another powerlifting meet, won best lifter again. Then he wanted to take his powerlifting meet up, but then he started getting the typical niggles that you get in powerlifting. He goes, nah, it's not worth it. So now he's gone back into triathlon, aquathon, marathon, and just did his first marathon. But, I don't train a lot of people anymore, but I think I only train 4 or 5 people, and most of them are either pretty high level or they're really fucked up. So I've got 2 excellent coaches, Shane and Ben, that basically do everything else because I'm too busy to take on clients now. And I was getting a client ready for Pro Raw, but then it got canceled. Yeah,
that sucked. That really sucked. We had this is where I really got to try the velocity based training. We had a seminar for the listeners. We had a seminar yesterday on velocity based training. You came to it, and a lot of those experiments was actually during that prep. Because it's going to be the most controlled environment, because we got the people at the absolute top, and we got people who are going to follow everything I say. And so I got really good data, really good data from that. And that's where I had Sarah. She hit that 257 and a half kilo squat, and she would have killed that comp, absolutely killed that comp. Because I said if we could get her bench back to where it was, it's like we were going to win that competition. And then I had a 17-year-old kid who went from 240 squat to 270 squat at the age of 17.
Crazy.
And so there's, I would have, that was a big bummer, because it would have been like the proof at the end of the journey, even though we still hit those numbers. But the powerlifting world, if you haven't hit in a comp, it's not official.
Yeah.
But
it's funny, you and I talked about this, like the difference of where I'm from versus moving here, and the difference in people who lift. Because in Texas, everybody lifts. They're all corn-fed country boys, so they lift for American football, and also we start competing in powerlifting when we're 14. And so seeing guys doing 500-pound squats, 550-pound squats is like common. Like you go to any gym and there's a dozen guys who can put 4 plates on a bench and 5 or 6 plates on a squat. And then I got here, and you just never see that.
No.
So that hearing a 17-year-old that's that strong, like that's to me Texas strong. But you never see that here, because most of the young kids are too interested in looking good. And so they do fluffy bodybuilder work, and you see a lot of younger bodybuilders, but you don't see a lot of younger powerlifters.
Is powerlifting culture pretty strong?
Huge.
Pretty strong there.
Huge. When I went in high school, so we do multi-sport, right? So you do football, and then you do basketball, and then there's kind of a lag in the wintertime before track and field starts, and also baseball. So I talked to my coach when I was 14, and I said, listen, can we start? I wanted to wrestle. I always wanted to be a grappler, right? But in Texas, that's not a big thing. It's mainly in the North Midwest and also in the Northeast. And so I said, can we start wrestling? He goes, we can't start wrestling because we can't wrestle anybody. So, but why don't we start powerlifting? And I went, yeah, let's do powerlifting. So we started a powerlifting team, and we fucking dominated. Like, we destroyed everybody. We had excellent coaches that were all powerlifters and ex-collegiate football players. So we were taught how to do things right. So everybody went to state. Everybody won everything all the time. Then when I left high school and went to college, I kind of fell out of that and got into bodybuilding for a little bit of time. And then I got bored with bodybuilding and went back into powerlifting. But like I told you yesterday, that's when all the supportive gear got kind of insane, like double, triple denim, custom shirts and shit. And I hated it. Like I was always, it's you in a singlet and shoes and the bar, and that's it. So I refused to wear the supportive gear. I was the idiot that would buy an Inza Rage X, and I would show up to the meet and put it on for the first time at the meet. The only way I was going to win is using a shirt. And I think I did a bench only contest, and I ended up dumping the bar and almost breaking my elbows because the spotters didn't catch it in time. And after that, I was like, fuck this, I'm done.
So there was no raw. It was just one category.
Nobody did raw.
You just put on anything you wanted.
Pretty much, yeah. It was almost, at that time, almost unrestricted. I mean, they had some contests that were like single ply only, but most of it was whatever you showed up in.
Yeah. So that would have been IPF still only single ply
IPF would
back
still
then.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
But most of the other ones that you would do, was the USPF and some of the other ones, I lifted in the USPF, and it was still, most of it was bring what you can, and then they kind of went just getting into single ply stuff, but I fucking hated it.
That's the same. Is that the Federation of West Side?
West Side, there's so many now. That USPF wasn't theirs. I can't remember that.
USPF.
A lot of those.
SPF is what it is now, isn't it? No.
Fuck if I know. I think it was APF back then.
Yeah.
And then people started leaving there because, you were talking about powerlifting not being a subjective sport. Well, sometimes depth can be.
Oh, yeah.
And so people started getting mad because people were breaking records, but they weren't going to depth. It's like, that's not,
right.
You don't have the record. You were 2 inches too high. Like, that's not a full squat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes both ways, though. You go to meets where they're just too strict, and then you go to meets that it's just. And there's also the politics. So you say there's politics in bodybuilding, was just in powerlifting as well. And this is why federations have changed, and new people create new federations or take over, and we'll get just not managed properly. And I've had a few people who used to compete in, I won't name stuff. But then they'll go to they'll go to one of the old school federations, but because they're part of a newer federation, they kept calling them on depth. But this person was known to be someone who was deep as fuck, but just because he's associated with something else, they decided just to not call him on depth. And then so he had to like really prove a sinker. So he ended up doing like 350 paused at the bottom just to prove a point, and then got it up, and then it's like, well, there's no way we can try to get out of this one. But yeah, I mean, I think I feel the sport in Australia now is just it's getting better.
Yeah,
it's getting better. A bit more better people in charge, or better people who are trying to actually make it grow.
You would think with technology these days that they could put a video camera and
I was just about to say that, or a fucking laser meter or something.
Yeah, and have the computer say whether it was at depth or not, so no one could ever complain anymore.
It could even do it relative to knee and hip angle and all that stuff, and it would just go green, and then you just press, right?
What kind of controversy that would bring up with people?
Fuck, would it be? Well, it'd be like
people have tried. So I go to all the AGM meetings where people put in motions to change the rules and stuff, and people suggested putting in video cam, and it just got thrown down every time. This has been brought in a few times. I can't remember the points, but they did bring up really good points on why they're not going to use video. And one part of it is that it is the rules to get for the judges to pass it, and it just would have made it messy in some ways. But yeah, and back when we were doing it, like when I first started, we were talking about this before. You have mostly equipped, so most of the information. I don't know if it was the same with you, but most of the information we had at the time was still kind of from the equipped lifters. And I remember if you look at some of my really, really old squats, it looked like I had I was lifting raw, but it looked like I had a multiply suit on. The ultra wide stance, trying to be up, trying to be more upright. And it's just like, man, squats are just completely different now. They've taken a more... Well, their own. They're both two separate. You can treat it as two different coaching methods now, training methods, because they're just so diverged. Now, was that the same?
We were doing mainly West Side stuff, but I kind of did my own thing. Even when I was in powerlifting groups, I would kind of do my own thing because it was the Wild West, man. They were doing crazy shit. I remember I got into a fight on a forum with a guy who had a private powerlifting club, and it was just like 4 or 5 of them out of his garage. And one of my buddies that I worked with trained with them and competed with them, and he was like, "Hey, you should talk to this guy Luke. He's been powerlifting since he was 14. I think he'd be a good addition." So the guy that owned it probably only powerlifted for about 2 years, but he was the guy that would go to all the seminars, so he thought he knew what he was talking about. So he starts talking shit to me one day online, and he goes, "You come out here and you show us what you got." I said, "All right." So I showed up, and I was in boots, jeans, and a singlet. And I walked in. They were getting done with their warm-ups, and I think they had 450 on the bar doing box squats. And I said, "You missed the warm-up." I go, "I don't need to warm up." So I just walked in, fucking cranked it, walked out, left. I got a message 2 days later. "Hey, man, you want to come be part of our club?" I'm like, "Yeah, if you stop talking shit." Like, I've got a bit more experience than you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would do stupid shit. They went to a metal militia seminar. So they came back and they go, "All right, we're going to do dynamic effort, 2 and 3 board bench press." I go, "Okay." They put the 2 board on, and they're slamming the bar into the board and then ricocheting it off their chest.
Yeah.
And every time you see their chest like cave in 2 or 3 inches. And so it got my turn to get on the bar, and I'm like, "I'm not fucking doing that. Fuck that. I don't need to do stupid shit like that. You're going to break a rib." And I didn't last long at that.
Yeah.
I changed the music too, because they were all, back then, everybody wanted to be West Side, so they were all fat, they were all bald, and they all had goatees. And they all listened to like Satan Thrasher music, that real fucking annoying shit. And I'd walk in, I'm like, I'm I'm not listening to this. So I'd pull Jay-Z out of my car and put the CD in and start playing Jay-Z. And they're all like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not listening to that shit.
So that's interesting because you generally fall into two camps, right? Like, I train to hip hop. You tend to train to the thrasher stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I can't do it. It's too angry for me.
I started in the sport when I was still a bit old, old school, where the only thing in the gym was deadlift platform, squat rack,
okay,
chains and boards everywhere.
Yeah.
Like that was the gym, and it was so funny. I remember a mate of mine. He was like deep in the bodybuilding world, and I was deep in the powerlifting world at the time, and he was just so thrown back when he walked in, because it's like the gym owner at the time is like he was sitting at his desk, no shirt on. He had a bowl of sausages he was just eating from his barbecue. And then he had his dog, he was feeding his dog with some sausages, and it's like, oh, I'm just coming to have a session. It's like, oh, man, come on in. Yeah. And that was it. And it was like, yeah, it's so different now. So different now.
Yeah.
But I do miss how it was. It was a kind of a strong club.
Yeah.
Strong family. But it's good though. It's going in a good direction.
Yeah. I'd really like to see some of these social justice warriors talking about toxic masculinity come in a session of the old school session, and you'll see what toxic masculinity really means.
Oh man, that was so much fun those days. And same thing too. It was like, man, the shit we did was freaking stupid sometimes, and it was like you're just like different humans then, and we've gotten a lot smarter now, because I broke myself so many times trying to do some of the things we're doing, various types of stuff we're doing, like some of West Side stuff. We're doing a lot of Russian stuff, because they're kind of the only thing. It was like West Side and Russian powerlifting. Yeah. It was like the only two kind of bits of information we were getting all our programs from, and those Russian programs. Have you done any of them?
Like Chico and stuff like that. That will break you real fast.
I did Shaco for like about 2.5 years straight.
Fuck.
And the worst one was during 2013. I ran 3-week cycles. So I did states, nationals, and then 4 comps: states, nationals, states, nationals, worlds, then Pro Raw 6. By the time I got to worlds, I had the craziest fatigue. It was so bad that it didn't matter how much I slept, I just would not be awake. I was just such extreme fatigue, but I was still going in every day, trying to hit every set. And then knees were freaking breaking, my freaking shoulders were breaking, everything was just breaking. But back then that mindset was just keep going, just keep going. And then I backed up with, didn't do so well at Worlds, and then just backed up with another comp, Pro Raw 6 at the time. And that's from that day, it took me about, from that Pro Raw 6, it took me about 3 years to recover, 3 years to get back to normal.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So, yeah, that was full on.
Wow.
And after those 3 years, the sport was completely different.
Yeah.
What I was doing back then was like freaking the best there was at the time, and then it was like child's play. It just moved so quickly.
I was thinking about this on the drive over, about what we used to do in high school, and it'd be 2 months. You would compete every Saturday. And I'm like, fuck. Like, I used to compete every Saturday for 2 to 2.5 months straight. Like, now you look at it and go, what the fuck were we doing? Like,
Yeah. It's fucking stupid. But then you also, like I always say, because all the coaches the powerlifting coaches that are kind of around now, we're all kind of that original little group. And I think the best thing about it is that we learnt from all the mistakes, from every single possible mistake. But not only that, we kind of built the sport from scratch. So we knew all the new things coming in and coming out, and the changes that have occurred. So it's like we had this really deep foundation understanding of just powerlifting sport and how it's developed. So then we know so much more, so much better than someone new coming in who just can't get that same experience. So I think the only way I've ever made it as far as I did, and as a powerlifting coach, and I think it's like it's the end now. I don't think anyone else can make it to that level in terms of powerlifting coaching, because I got in at the right time when it was still so very so very small and been around since its boom. So especially with Raw.
I was really surprised when I moved here how big powerlifting is here. And bodybuilding is pretty big too. Like growing up, powerlifting is big in Texas, but it wasn't really that big anywhere else. And bodybuilding was pretty much non-existent except for all the weirdos, you know. Then it's just blown up, and it's blown up for a lot of good things and also a lot of bad things too, especially the bodybuilding stuff.
Yeah, the bodybuilding.
And everybody's a coach now. Everybody's a bodybuilding coach. You go and do, you go to you become Alice Springs bodybuilder 2020, and all of a sudden it's your first comp, and now you're a comp coach.
Yeah.
And it's like you were on stage, you find out somebody got their pro card because they were on stage with 3 people. It's like you were just the least shitty looking one. Somehow you get your pro card.
Man. And now everyone has, it's like their Instagram name now. Everyone has
Coach.
Yeah.
Or
pro.
pro.
Or pro.
Yeah, it's just another way that people are just desperate to turn what they love into some form of professional endeavor, right? Like, and that's where I guess the lines get blurred, because people are willing to not be very good at it and take on people who they're not going to get any results with. But if they're getting paid and they get to train all day, that's kind of what they want to be known as, a coach, rather than. I don't think they're doing it from your perspective, where you're bringing people in, you're getting results. Like, that's the reason you're working with people. Whereas I think there's a lot of people who just want to be a coach because they just want a professional lift, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They just want to be a professional fitness industry person, right? And they'll do it any way they can. Like, some people go down the selling supplements route. Some people go down the fucking doing the merch thing. Right, everybody's got a different angle, but that's just the outcome, isn't it? Right?
I think what blows my mind the most with the bodybuilding is you could literally fuck up 100 people and people will still come to you for coaching. There's the one WBFF coach that gave the guy the fentanyl patch and killed him. He's still got a business. He just rebranded. Like,
nice.
What the fuck?
Nice.
I think if they sell emotion, and it's just like they've mastered that, and it doesn't matter what they've done.
You could tell a fucking person off the street who's desperate for change, I can deliver that change to you, and they will not look at the evidence based on that. They'll be like, oh fuck, I want that to be true. Okay, what do you need? And they'll just hand the money over.
I think this is where, as a good coach, you need to be able to separate that.
Yeah.
The goals and the emotion that drives that goals. And then what is really the end goal, and that's a harder conversation than most people think. Like, that is hard to get out of some people, really hard.
We had it a couple of weeks ago, and you couldn't get it out of me, could you?
No, you don't know what you want.
I don't fucking have a clue. And I sit next to him, fucking talking for hours about this shit, and then he hits me with the questions, and I'm like, shit, I don't really know. Just want to be stronger, I think. Like, yeah.
Then let's get strong. See where it takes us. See what story builds. So what are you doing with Muscle Nerds now?
That's a good question. Now with the COVID stuff, it's going to put a spanner in the works, hasn't it? I think right now it's just going back and refining some of our courses, putting more stuff online. Right now I've been doing a lot of research and coming up with new stuff, trying to be innovative, and then making sure our gym doesn't go bankrupt.
Bad timing.
I buy a gym and 5 days later I have to close it immediately. Like, this is fantastic.
Oh shit, really? It was that soon? Oh,
luckily we've made it work, so we've gotten all the clients back plus some, and then more people are training, so it's been good. It's just making it sustain. Continue to grow it a little bit.
Actually, got an interesting a question I kind of do want to know is I've been working kind of like been educating for running workshops and lectures for about probably 3 years now, and it's slowly worked more and more towards coaches and athletes now, and that's where it's just kind of my content's changed and it's more suited to those individuals. But I want to break into it a lot more. How have you breaking into that industry, that education industry?
I mean, the first thing was I working for Charles.
Yeah.
And back back then it was to work for him, he had to choose you and then ask you if you wanted to do it. You couldn't just become an educator back then. You couldn't just we didn't have social media like it is now. So you couldn't just put out videos and all of a sudden start educating people. You basically, a mentor chose you and you got into it like that. And so that's how I got into it. And fuck, I was awful at first. I was scared to death to public speak. And what ended up happening when I showed up and Charles wasn't there anymore, they had hired Dr. James Laval to come in and revamp a lot of the stuff and put more science-based, evidence-based stuff into the program. And the old BioSig was 275 slides. When I showed up, there was 550, and he had thrown a bunch of them out and replaced them. And I got those slides about 2 days before I had to give my first seminar.
Shit.
So I showed up, I had no idea. I was looking through the slides going, fuck, I've got to figure out how to teach this. And then when I was in the middle of teaching, one of my contacts ripped, and I didn't have my glasses with me. So half the time I had to sit in front of my computer and just try to look at the computer. I couldn't even stand up and lecture, and I was basically just reading off the slides because I couldn't do anything else, and it fucked me up. So it was kind of a sink or swim thing, and just learn really fast. The second one was in Manchester. So I'd never been to Europe. So I'm in this class with all these people. I can't understand a word anybody's saying because all the accents. And I'm in front of 100 and something people in a big ass hotel. And I remember this guy, I think he was Irish, and he kept saying, "Can you do this?" And I was going, "Are you saying can or can't? Can or can't?" And I don't know what happened to my voice, but my voice got some weird mangled Irish accent, and I said, "Cunt." And I immediately stopped, and you could hear a pin drop.
Right.
And I put my hand over my mouth, and I was like, "Ooh, shit." And everybody started laughing. And I go, "Why are you guys laughing?" They're like, "That's word's not a big deal here." If you said that in America, they would grab pitchforks and torches and try to string you up, right? So, so that kind of broke me in a little bit. And then every time I gave another presentation, it just got better and better. And then
couldn't get worse.
Yeah. It's all uphill from there, right? But, and then, I take it, the lecturing I take very seriously. So I've done a lot of courses on how to give better presentations and things like that, like super uncomfortable courses, coaching and that type of thing, where they make you do ridiculous shit to get better. And now it's nothing. But it was just I spent a lot of time just helping people for free on forums, and that got Charles's attention, and doing a lot of courses, and then bringing on, and then assisting, and then getting kind of more comfortable, and then being turned loose on people. And I love it. It's not for everybody, especially when you do it internationally and you're flying all the time. But to me, there's nothing better than when I'm in front of people giving a performance, and that's how I look at it. I don't fuck around. That's the one thing I can say I'm real fucking good at is educating.
That's where I think I found my passion. Is that you kind of get to express the full extent of your knowledge by trying to get someone else to understand the whole complexity of it, and I'm really want to break more and more into the market. And I've managed to have up to I think 80 people at one workshop. It got pretty good. It's a lot of free work, a lot of free courses.
You have to, right?
Yeah,
you have to.
Yeah. And it was exhausting, because as you probably know, building content is a lot of bloody work.
Yeah.
And then not only that, you're refining workshop after workshop after workshop. But
your slides are amazing.
Okay.
Your slides are fucking amazing. I'm looking at your slides going, why can't I make slides like that? Fuck.
What about when you came to Australia and made Muscle Nerds? How'd you break into that industry?
You know what? We kind of just fell into it. When I left Pollock & Group, I didn't have a job, and my wife didn't have a job. She quit both of her jobs and sold her car and flew to America to be with me. And then we all of a sudden found ourselves with no money and no job. But when I announced the fact that I left Pollock & Group, I had hundreds of people message to want me to do workshops because they wanted to work with me, but they didn't want to work with Pollock & Group.
Right.
So we were like, how are we going to get home? Like, we need to get back to either New Zealand or we need to get back to Australia. How are we going to do this? And then we had a guy in Kuwait say, hey, I've got 30 coaches here. Will you come and teach your stuff to them? And I said, yes. Then I had a guy in Dubai ask me to do the same thing. So that got us to Dubai and Kuwait and then got us home. and then we did one in New Zealand, and then when we came over here, we did one at Gold Coast, and then it just kind of blew up from there. But
Wow.
it was insane because we didn't know anything about business. So we were broke. So it was like massive, chasing our tail and being very reactive about things, and just like, hey, will you come to Manchester? Yes. Will you come to Hong Kong? Yes.
You just got to jump on every opportunity, don't you?
That's it. And then Zoe and I couldn't be in the same country with each other for more than 3 months. So it was like we just traveled nonstop for 2 years. So we built a lot of cash flow, but we were still broke because we had to stay in hotels and Airbnbs, and we couldn't stay in the same country for very long.
Yeah.
So it was just like country hopping all the time. And then I finally got my visa here, and then we moved here.
And so you kind of here in Australia, is it like an ongoing education business here as well?
Yeah, Australia and London are our two biggest markets.
Okay.
America and Canada's not that great, especially America, because a lot of the people in America, they want to learn TRX and BOSU bullshit. They have some weird aversion to learning the science part. Then Canada's no good because it's very expensive to fly in Canada. So if you go to Canada, they want you to go to Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto.
Yeah.
They won't actually fly to you. It's like, fuck you, I can do one. They don't understand how expensive it is to do it on an international level. It costs tens of thousands of dollars to fly somewhere, rent a room, do all that stuff. It's like, no, you can fly to me. I just flew from Australia. I flew 24 hours to give this. You can fly 2 hours to me. They won't fucking do it.
Right.
It's insane. So we do a lot of work in Europe. We do a lot of work here, and that's the majority of what we concentrate on.
So a lot of the people here you're teaching now are Australian, here in Australia?
Yeah.
How are you reaching that? So how are you reaching that market? Is this just all through mainly word of mouth?
Yeah, it's just the reputation and word of mouth. It's just kind of blown up. Yeah.
That's it, eh?
Yeah, that's it.
You just got to have you just got to have the reputation. I think that's something that takes years to build, isn't it?
So that's the thing. I mean, you build a reputation like what you have, and the people that want to learn that stuff will want to come.
Yeah.
And they won't make excuses. It's just a bad time right now to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I want to do a symposium and bring a bunch of people from Europe and America that people here wouldn't normally get to see because they won't fly over there. And those people don't want to fly here. But if I can convince them to fly here, we'll do a symposium kind of like Swiss. Try to do a yearly thing. But, now we can't do it until that opens up. And
They've I know they're trying to do that at the Arnold's. So they started their first one with a few people. I think they had Eddie Hall, Steffi Cohen, Dr. Locke, Sebastian Oreb, and they're trying to grow that to be at Arnold's, but now that's dead too.
Yeah.
So
and I want to bring people over that people over here would never have heard of, like out of the box thinkers and people who are innovating things.
And that's the thing. Like those are the people I'm always interested in, because like the people I've been following are the people who are just not popular, at all. So I meet heaps of these people that I talk to. Like they only had like 1,000 or 2,000 followers, but they were just the absolute most craziest experts. And a lot of them spoke at Swiss as well, and so I've gotten mentoring from a lot of those people that are already there. So I already knew a few people there, but no one's interested in wanting to meet or talk to those people.
Yeah,
but it's because of those people I've been able to solve very big, tough problems, and not only that, being able to use that information to innovate in powerlifting and strength training. So
you know why they don't have followers? They're too busy fucking working.
Yeah.
When your job isn't getting followers, you actually do work, and that's the people you want to learn from, not the people with 1 million followers that don't know shit.
I think that's where people find it hard to distinguish between what is good and not so good information. But I think that's a skill. It's a skill in itself. So
I mean, a lot of the people that you see on YouTube and Instagram, they're just parroting other people's information. Yeah. So they're watching other people's videos and making their own video. Yeah. They don't actually understand the stuff. Like if you want to learn, go to the person who's they're learning from. Go to the source and learn it, because my information changes all the time because I find new things in research and I try things. And so stuff that I was teaching 3 years ago is the same foundation, but there's a lot of stuff I found that works even better and faster. Don't go to somebody who did somebody's course 3 years ago. Go to the person who's actually writing the courses, because they're the ones who actually understand the stuff at a deep level.
Yeah.
I think yesterday someone said said to me is like, "Oh, what's the best course? What's the best course you've done?" And the funny thing is, like, I have not done many courses. What I usually do is I come across a problem that I really want to solve, and I find the expert.
Yeah.
And I'll pay them whatever I need to pay just to sit down with them for a few hours and solve this problem. And then not only that, the way I ask questions of trying to, why, how do you understand it? How do you know to solve that problem? And then that's where I start to, and I find I retain 10 times better because I'm already trying to solve a problem. So when I'm trying to solve that problem, I never forget that information. So I seem to see a lot of people who go to a lot of courses and try and do a lot of research, but don't apply it the same as I apply it. Anyway, I seem to take it a lot further than what I like to see with other coaches or other trainers, because they're not. I don't think it's been used directly into solving issues that they have. It's like course junkies, almost.
Yeah, certification whores.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when people ask me how I learned all this stuff. It's like I did the same thing. I spent all my 20s and my 30s finding who's the best at this, flying to see them or calling them on the phone. Who's the best at this, going to do this, buying this person's course that was good at this. And that's all I did, is study, and I still do that. I'm taking 4 or 5 courses right now. You've got to stay on top of your game, and especially if you're going to be an educator, you got to constantly be researching and trying new things and coming up with new ideas and stuff like that. So, yeah, that sounds like my whole journey is your journey as well. Yeah.
That's the reason I do this. But especially now it's gearing towards this podcast is more what I want to learn, but then that's the same stuff, hopefully the audience that I'm talking to want to know that as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the interesting conversation is that I'm trying to figure out, because everyone that we bring in are at a high level of their field and try to, how do they come to those conclusions? Because they may take a different path than I do, but they're all relevant.
Yeah.
And just builds a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I've never actually taken too many courses. I've only started taking courses in the last only in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
More time. I want to keep my education up now because I now have the time to do.
But there's a difference between educate. So I have this in my industry all the time, right? All the time. So I get people from film school who want tips on how to do stuff. And I have to tell them, well, I've never been to film school, I've never taken a course. And I have to teach them, I have to unteach them all the shit they've learned. And there's a difference between knowing how to acquire knowledge and knowing and doing courses. There's a big difference. I think a lot of people, like I said, it happens in my industry, they build up all these certificates. But then when you say, well, show me your work, it's shit, right? They can't put it together. They can't apply it. It doesn't. You have to have something to apply it to, and you have to. I think the idea of having a problem and fixing the problem, and knowing how to access the information correctly.
I think there was a conversation. There was a TED talk, and I think Elon Musk has a school based on that approach. That rather than how the industry is built today, of the factory-based working, where everyone needs to learn how to use a screwdriver. Here's your certificate for using a screwdriver.
Yeah.
Then now when you go find a job, you have to figure, you just know how to use a screwdriver, but you haven't figured out what the screwdriver's for.
Yeah.
And so he said, instead of that, it's like give them a car to fix, figure out how to fix that car. Then they'll learn that, okay, the screwdriver's for this, the wrench is for this. And then they build stronger connections. So I think it's similar to people doing education, doing courses, is that they have they're learning a lot of little things, but they're not knowing what problems, how that applies to. Where I've always done things the other way.
Yeah, I have an athlete with this issue. How do I fix it? Who do I need to talk to? Where's the knowledge? And you might still have to do a course.
Yeah,
but just having certificates doesn't equal knowledge, right? Well,
another reason I'm doing courses too is I'm trying to learn how to present information.
Of course, yeah.
So, and I'm trying to fill all the gaps a little bit more. So, like I was saying, in my head, if I don't have all the gaps filled, it kind of drives me mental. So,
I think we get a lot of people in our foundations course, because it's a lot of nutrition and gut health and stress and stuff like that. And we get a lot of dietitians and nutritionists that come in. And when I get to the basic nutritional biochemistry, like carbohydrate metabolism, they have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm like,
Right.
don't you have a degree? They're like, yeah, but we don't learn any of this. I'm like, what the fuck do you learn? I learned if somebody has IBS, you do this and you don't do this. And I went, then how are you going to write a diet if you can't predict an outcome? And then if you get to a roadblock, you don't know how to fix it. And they're like, well, that's why I'm here. I'm like, all right, cool. So let's teach you how to fix shit. You know,
It's exactly what
I think
Haley was
teaching-
saying before.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
Teaching people how to solve problems is the key. And I think for me personally, I think definitely the one thing that's helped me is that I have a background in physics. I majored in physics. I have a very strong understanding of the scientific method and how that method works, and how to look at data and research and evidence, and to know try and determine what is real and what is not real. And not only that, just the foundational knowledge of science, like anatomy, physiology, biology. I found evolutionary biology probably one of the most helpful things, understanding why the body is the way it is through evolution. But I think those have been the real true fundamental things that help me make all the connections, understand the connections a lot better.
That's the same thing. When I got into the biochemistry stuff and looking at cell physiology and figuring out why the metabolism regulates itself in certain ways, and how stress alters that, and how lifestyle alters that, and how training and different types of diets and nutrition alters that, learning that foundational chemistry allowed me to make big leaps in judgment on how things work, and then not waiting for somebody to fucking research it. And then you also, when you're reading nutritional research, you see where all the gaps are and when studies are just shit. And you'll see people, throwing studies around, and you go read the study and you're like, but this does not actually support your stance on anything. And you're using a 3-week study for people who aren't just going to diet for 3 weeks. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm out of questions.
Me too. An hour and a half.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, man.
Great.
Yeah.
Some good tangents there. So, but I'm sure there's specific topics we could dive crazy deep into. But it was a nice overall good conversation
great.
about
I
everything.
enjoyed it.
So, so muscle nerds, thank you for
Sorry
coming on.
for taking your name on accident.
Well, I don't know who took it first. Who had it first?
But you're not using yours anymore, though, right?
No, I still have the website.
Yeah.
I got .com.au. I think it was 2012 when I had that name. I made it a business name.
Yeah.
I didn't trademark it, but I did make it a business name.
Right.
So when did you do yours? But it's not,
Probably 2013, but we did the trademark.
Oh, you have to close it.
Yeah, we did the trademark in 2015. I think is when we did the trademark.
I think I've closed it because I want to leave. I kind of finally fully leave what that was about. I was in the middle, like with that. I was bodybuilding and powerlifting, strength training, but then I'm pretty hyper focused on performance.
Yeah.
Performance now. Body composition is still a major part of it and very important, but it's not mixed in the culture of bodybuilding anymore. Yeah. I'd say it's like body composition for performance, so, but performance mainly.
Yep.
Yeah, so much more interesting and so much less messed up people.
A lot less work.
I feel there's this huge science to talk about. I just find the technicality behind performance just absolutely fascinating, Yeah. Anyway,
Gym science.
all
right, man. Thanks for coming on.
man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool.
That's awesome.